Hare Krishna, and welcome to this week's Sunday Feast program. So thank you very much for joining us for this virtual event. A couple of quick announcements before I introduce tonight's speaker. The first is registration is open for the Vamsi Vaishnavs music school, led by our devotee here, Radhakund Mataji, who is a professional and trained singer, and I can attest as a personal testimony. My daughter is a student of hers. She is a fantastic teacher. So I'd encourage anyone with children between the ages of 5 through early teens to take advantage of this opportunity. She is hosting music singing classes virtually through Zoom. The other is, for those of you that wish to join, there is a daily Japa call hosted by ISKCON Chicago. And that takes place between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. For those of you that receive the temple email, the details will be there. For those of you on the ISKCON Chicago WhatsApp group, the Zoom information will be broadcast there as well. Finally, I'll turn it to tonight's speaker, His Grace Shyama Prabhu, whom I'm very excited to introduce tonight. In addition to being a fantastic speaker, is taking on a unique challenge in this continuation of the Brilliant as the Sun series, which is an overview of Srimad Bhagavatam. Last Sunday, we completed the last chapter in the first canto. So Shyama Prabhu is going to be introducing the entire second canto to us to set the stage for the upcoming Sunday Feast weeks. So very excited to announce that. And thank you especially Shyama Prabhu for taking that inspiration and letting us all benefit from that. So he titled his talk on creation and liberation. So I'll turn it over to you.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday feast. Am I loud and clear? Everybody can see me?
Yes.
Great. Am I the host? Yashodananda, can you make me the host so I can share my screen, please? Thank you. Okay, everyone. Before we begin tonight's class, I want to give you just a little bit of a cautionary note. We're doing a full canto in less than an hour. My hope is to finish it in 50 minutes. I did do a practice run earlier to see if we can hit that time, and I think we can. We will be covering a lot of ground. All of you know I speak kind of fast, so I will try my best to slow down this time around. The point I'm trying to make is we will cover a lot of ground. There's a lot of material here. It's the entire canto in 1 hour. So please, if you can, take notes, write things down. If you're multitasking, I really recommend maybe just give me 50 minutes of your life. I know that's asking for a lot because time is the most valuable commodity on earth, but I really don't know if you'll be able to multitask and actually be able to pay attention to the content, because there's just a lot in trying to cover a whole canto. So if you can, please give me the next 15 minutes of your life. And well, you're not giving it to me, you're actually giving it to the Srimad Bhagavatam, and then we can have a very engaging discussion afterwards. Yashodananda Prabhu, you'll monitor comments on Facebook and YouTube?
Just YouTube, yes.
Okay, great, fantastic. So let us begin with the invocation prayers. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratushe Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare Hare. I called my talk tonight Creation and Liberation because in some ways the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is an overview of the entire Bhagavatam. It explains the process of creation, the process of how we as pure souls are entangled in this material world. It also explains the path of liberation. How do we become free of this entanglement? And provides a summary of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam in its final chapter. So in many ways, it kind of resembles the summary of the Bhagavad Gita as it's presented in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And creation and liberation are the two fundamental themes of a spiritual practice, the process of how we become entangled and how we become free. So therefore I decided to call my presentation tonight Creation and Liberation, as it's an overview of the entire second canto. Now, where does the second canto really begin? The second canto begins when Parikshit Maharaj has been cursed by the son of a sage, and he's going to die in 7 days. He has left his kingdom, and he has come to the forest looking to answer a very profound question, a question that perhaps a lot of people nowadays deal with and face because there's so much death in our world today. The question he wants to answer is, what is the duty of a dying person? A very profound question, right? And to answer a profound question, you need to go to wise people. If you take a question like that and you post it on social media or Facebook or Twitter or something like that, where most of us are just as bewildered like everybody else, the answers we're going to get are not going to be very deep, right? If you ask a whole bunch of people on Twitter, like, what is the duty of a dying person? They might say something like, just go to a Caribbean island and party till you drop, or give away all your money to charity. There's so many answers that can come, right? What Parikshit Maharaj wants to know is, what is the most beneficial thing that a living entity can do when he's about to die or she's about to die? A very, very deep and profound question. And to answer this question, the sages that have been gathered in this assembly are now waiting for the appearance of a great saint, Shukadev Goswami, who, when he appears on the scene, is recognized as the most wise amongst everyone. Therefore, he's given the seat of honor. And the questions of Parikshit Maharaj are posed to Shukadev Goswami. And in the second canto, we hear the first words, the first, you could say, explanation, the first answers that Shukadev Goswami will now give to Parikshit Maharaj's question. It begins with the first chapter. And before he answers the questions directly, he wants to explain the nature of conditioned souls in this material world, which is what Shukadev Goswami will do in verses 2 and 3 of the first chapter. By the way, in our summary, what we're going to do is we're going to be highlighting key themes in each chapter and then move on. So we're not going to look at every single verse in every single chapter, because that's, impossible by the nature of time. So we're going to look at the main themes of each chapter. The first chapter, Shukadev Goswami is laying out the process of the nature of becoming entangled in this world, and the path of freedom, the path of ending this cycle of entanglement that we're trapped in. And before we do that, before we look into the first chapter, I just want to show you guys sort of a breakdown of the whole canto by chapters. So the first 3 chapters deal with this process of entanglement and the path to freedom. Chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7. Sorry, it says 3 to 7, but it's supposed to be 4 to 7. I apologize for the typo. Deals with the process of creation. So how does Lord Brahma, how does the process, how does the whole material world come into being? Very profound question, right? How does the whole material existence come into being? The different planets, the different forms of living entities. How does it all take place? And the final 3 chapters are a summary of the Srimad Bhagavatam, as well as chapter 9, which contains sort of the condensed summary of the Srimad Bhagavatam in the form of 4 key verses called the Chatur Shloki. These are called the seed verses of the Bhagavatam. So you can imagine a seed is something very tiny from which a huge plant will emerge. In the same way, the Chatur Shloki is only 4 verses, but the entirety of the philosophy of the Srimad Bhagavatam is condensed within these 4 verses. And then the last chapter is a summary of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is sort of an overview of what we're looking at today. So let us now look at chapters 1 to 3, illusion and its antidote. Let me share my screen with you. So let me share, I've already shared my screen. Let me share with you, I want to share another screen where I'm going to be covering individual verses. So I don't want to put too much text in the PowerPoint because it's a little hard to follow. So let me do something instead. We'll just switch to this real quick. Okay, give me 1 second here. Hopefully there'll come a day when Zoom can allow you to share multiple boxes at the same time, but until then we'll have to just do it like this. Great. The first verse we're going to look at is the second verse of the first chapter. Shukadev Goswami wants to describe the state of conditioned souls in the material world. He says, those persons who are materially engrossed, being blind to the knowledge of ultimate truth, have many subject matters for hearing in human society, O Emperor. He carries on this idea by saying in the next verse, the lifetime of such an envious householder is passed at night in either sleeping or in sex indulgence, and in the daytime either in making money or maintaining family members. So in a nutshell, Shukadev Goswami has explained what is the state of conditioned souls in the material world, right? We spend our time talking about things that have nothing to do with our ultimate benefit, and we spend our days working hard to make money and our nights having sense pleasure, either through sex or maybe we go out and drink, or the variety of things that conditioned souls do in this world. And in this way, everyone's time is simply passing, right? Nobody is doing anything that is so special, so unique, so different from what Shukadev Goswami has basically just summarized in 2 short verses at the very beginning of this great epic. So what is the solution? The solution to this, the antidote to this crisis of entanglement that we're in, is to actually bring our awareness and our attention on the Supreme Lord. In the 20th verse of this chapter, Parikshit Maharaj says, one's mind is always agitated by the passionate mode of material nature and bewildered by the ignorant mode of nature, right? So in other words, sometimes our mind is running after things, and in other cases, our mind is feeling, you could say, bewildered or confused by what's happened to us, right? We're living into these constantly in these 2 states of being. They're either chasing after something or they're wondering, why did this happen to me? But one can rectify such conceptions by the relationship of Vishnu and thus become pacified by cleansing the dirty things created by them. So this is how Shukadev Goswami wants to set up what's going to come next in chapter 1, 2, and 3, which is the process of meditation. So what he's explained to Parikshit Maharaj is that, look, right, in this material world, we're all trapped by the mode of passion and ignorance to chase after things that don't ultimately have benefit for us. And the way to end this cycle that we're trapped in is to bring our awareness to God. Now, how do we do that? Right? So the first kind of meditation that Shukadev Goswami explains is going to be a meditation based on the universal form of the Lord using the elements of nature. Now, this is very interesting, right? This is you could say introductory meditation. In introductory meditation, you want to start off with something simple, right? So everyone has access to the world. Everyone can see mountains, trees, rivers, things of that sort. And therefore, if you want to start talking about something that's very high, you want to start off with something that everybody has access to, like material nature. So that's where he begins his explanation of where to start meditating from, right? Here's an example of what he talks about in the rest of the chapter. This is the 25th verse of the chapter. He says, the gigantic universal form of the personality of Godhead within the body of the universal shell, which is covered by 7-fold material elements, is the subject for the Virat conception. So sounds a little complicated. He breaks it down later on. Basically, what he's saying is that, look, you can look around this world and you can see through the elements of nature the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's all he's actually saying in slightly more complicated way. This is a particular logic in Sanskrit. The idea is something like this. Suppose you and I are walking, on a dark night, walking through a field. You might say to me, hey, can you point out where is the moon? And then to show you the moon, I might say, yeah, look, there's a banyan tree over there. Look above the second branch to the left-hand side and you'll see the moon. Oh, I see what you're talking about. Now the banyan tree and the moon are 2 different cosmic entities. One is here on Earth, the other is a celestial planet that's way out there in the universe, right? But I'm using something of this world to indicate something not of this world, right? It's the same kind of logic that Shukadev Goswami is teaching introductory meditation by saying, look, we begin by looking at the form of the Lord, the universal form within the existing material creation. And in that way, we approach him. And one should do this with great diligence, and one should do this with great concentration. This is how he concludes he concludes this chapter with this verse. He says, one should concentrate his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who alone distributes himself in so many manifestations, just as ordinary persons create thousands of manifestations in dreams. So what is the significance of this first line? What he's trying to tell us is, just like an ordinary person while dreaming can create so many realities, right? So many realities. I mean, I've had some strange dreams the last couple of days. I don't know about you guys, but I think this change of season has led to some irregular sleep cycles. So many realities are emerging in my dreams. And sometimes it's like I'm of a certain age in a part of the world when I was at a different age, if that makes any sense. Like I'm like 20 years old in the house that I lived in when I was 6 years old. Such weird manifestations. But in the same way, the Lord actually has appeared in this world in so many different ways. That's what he's just finished explaining, that how you can see the Supreme Lord in so many different ways in this material world. So in that way, concentrate on him, the only all blissful absolute truth. Otherwise, one will be misled and will cause his own degradation. So if in this multiplicity of universal phenomena, if you can still bring your attention to God, right? Then you can actually free yourself and elevate your consciousness. I want to read you something brief from Srila Prabhupada's purport. That's very nice. It's just a nice philosophical point. Prabhupada writes here, he tries to impress upon us, this is Shukadev Goswami, that instead of diverting our attention to several branches of self-realization, we should concentrate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the supreme object of realization, worship, and devotion. Self-realization, here's a very powerful line, please hear carefully. Self-realization is, as it were, offering a fight for eternal life against the material struggle for existence, right? Self-realization is offering a fight for eternal life against the material struggle for existence. Just like if someone is sick or ill, they might take supplements and medicine and immunity boosters and start exercising and change their diet. All of this is posing a fight against the disease. In the same way, we are trapped in the cycle of birth and death. The process of self-realization is offering a fight for eternal life against the material struggle for existence. And therefore, by the illusory grace of the external energy, the yogi or the devotee is faced with many allurements which can entangle a great fighter again in the bondage of material existence. Interesting point, right? So let this sink in for a second. Self-realization is offering a fight for eternal life, but then Prabhupada says that by the illusory grace, right? In other words, he's saying, and actually the illusory energy provides so many allurements which can entangle us, and he's calling it the grace of the external energy, the blessing of the external energy. So why are obstacles blessings? This is the question that popped in my mind. You know, Prabhupada's saying here that the illusory energy is blessing us with so many allurements that can entangle us in our journey of self-realization. And my realization is because until we're tested, we don't actually know where we're at, right? Just like in school, if you take a child and you put him in third grade, then fourth grade, then fifth grade, and sixth grade, but you never test him on how much he's captured in each grade, he never has a chance to actually apply what he has learned, to choose what he has learned over what he does not want to learn, right? To actually solidify his teaching, his learning. He never has an opportunity for doing that. Tests is how the material energy really gauges our ability to choose Krishna over Maya, to strengthen our realizations. Because when we choose Krishna, it requires two things. It requires spiritual experience and faith. And every time we choose Krishna, our faith and our experience grows a little bit more, right? So the only way to grow in spiritual life is to be tested. And every time we get tested, we somehow or other try to choose Krishna over Maya. And in this way, we grow in our spiritual realization and abilities. So that is chapter 1. In chapter 2, Shukadev Goswami continues to give more details on how to meditate on the Lord. Here's an example of how chapter 2 discusses meditation. Now, the difference is in chapter 1, he was focusing more on seeing the Lord through his universal form. In chapter 2, the meditation becomes a little bit more personal. So here's an example of a verse. On text 13, you can look at my screen. The process of meditation should begin from the lotus feet of the Lord and progress to his smiling face. The meditation should be concentrated upon the lotus feet, then the calves, then the thighs, and in this way higher and higher. The more the mind becomes fixed upon the different parts of the limbs, one after another, the more the intelligence becomes purified. In other words, the more we bring our consciousness to become fixed on Krishna, right, then the more purified we become of material contamination. And in this way, you can see how the meditation is now becoming a little bit more personal in nature. And then Shukadev Goswami in the rest of the chapter explains how the yogi, having fixed his concentration on this form of the Lord in this particular way within his heart, is able to leave his body from the appropriate chakra, the topmost chakra, and is able to enter into a higher planet and eventually cease the cycle of rebirth. But then at the very end of this chapter, Shukadev Goswami gives us a recommendation that actually, if you truly want to meditate on God, right, to do it in a more powerful way than just mechanical focus or mechanical concentration is to actually become attracted to the Lord, right? So far, he's talked about meditation and focusing on God as a kind of meditative practice, trying to focus the mind, focus your energy to think of God. But if we actually become attracted to him, then that concentration and focus happens much more naturally. And this is how he concludes the second chapter with this verse, text 34, very beautiful verse. He says, the great personality Brahma, with great attention and concentration of the mind, studied the Vedas 3 times, and after scrutinizingly examining them, he ascertained that attraction for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is the highest perfection of religion. So yes, we can meditate on God through the universe, through nature, we can focus on the image of God within our heart, we can do all of that. But actually the most powerful and profound way to meditate on God is to become attracted to him. And this is why we will hear more and more about who God is in the rest of the Bhagavatam, because the best way to get attracted to someone is to hear about them, right? Just like if you're a young man and you're looking for a girl and I come to you and I start describing the qualities of a particular Mataji, you might feel attraction, like, oh yeah, she sounds so nice, her qualities sound so wonderful. Attraction begins by hearing, and that's the whole message of the Bhagavatam. In the third chapter of this canto, Shukadev Goswami wants to attack a doubt. Someone might be thinking, okay, great, you've talked about meditating on God and thinking about the universal form and all of this, but what's wrong with worshiping demigods? Aren't demigods also like godlike creatures, right? Aren't demigods also godlike creatures? So why can't I just meditate on demigods? And so Shukadev Goswami is saying that actually worshiping demigods only gives you a very temporary benefit, only gives you a very temporary result. So therefore, worshiping demigods is not the ideal way to engage your time, ideal way to focus your energy in spiritual practices. Don't send it towards the demigod, send it towards that which will give you a more eternal result. And therefore, he quotes this verse in the third chapter, the 10th verse of the third chapter. Again, this is in response to someone's doubt that, hey, why don't I just worship demigods, right? So then Shukadev Goswami has this verse, which he quotes. He says, a person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, because this is the doubt sometimes. People think, I have too many material desires, so let me worship Ganesh or Kali or Durga, or let me worship the sun god, let me worship, because in this chapter, Shukadev Goswami is explaining, if you want a good wife, worship so-and-so, if you want progeny, worship so-and-so, if you want wealth, worship so-and-so. So then Shukadev Goswami says, you know what, even if you're full of all material desires, or without any material desire, you're completely purified of material desire, or you want liberation, must by all means worship the supreme whole, the personality of Godhead. In other words, whatever your desire may be, right? You don't have to worship anybody else because Krishna is the supreme whole. And by worshiping him, one worships all the demigods and one approaches all living entities in creation. So with this, he continues with this theme in the rest of chapter 3. And now the sages of Naimisharanya have become very, very eager and very, very excited to hear more and more about Krishna. And so they start asking questions towards the end of chapter 3 on the process of material creation. How does this material world all come about? So let me share my screen once again. Let me just switch the screen real quick. It'll just take a second here. Do you see my PowerPoint again? Oh, wait. No? Give me 1 second, folks. There we go. So we looked at chapters 1 to 3, and now we're going to look at chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7. But before I dive into those, I want to contextualize them a little bit for everyone. What is out there? I think everyone, when you were children, when you were young, perhaps, maybe you had this. As we grow older, we become a little bit less, you could say, curious about the world. But I remember as a kid, going out, sitting underneath the trees and looking at the sky and wondering, like, what are these planets? What is the moon? What is the sun? What is the stars? What, does anybody live out there? Is there any life in the universe? We feel so tiny and insignificant, right? I'll tell you a quick story. The start of my spiritual life happened when I was backpacking through South America. I was in Ecuador, and I'd hitchhiked to the top of a mountain where there were these famous hot water springs, this sulfur spring water that comes out from deep within the mountains, very hot and supposed to be very healing. The Indians, the Native Americans worship this place, very holy place. And so I was sitting in this hot pool of, like volcanic water. I mean, it's not gonna cook you, by the way. It's not that hot, but it's pretty warm. And it was a very cold night. The stars had come out. I'm surrounded by these mountains. The steam from this water is slowly rising all around me. It was a very I still remember this moment like it was yesterday. But I remember for the first time in my life, I looked up at the sky, and I used to do this a lot as a kid, but it had kind of died away as I got older. But I remember as an adult, for the first time, I looked up at the sky and I looked at the mountains I was surrounded by, and I thought to myself, wow, I am so tiny. I am so tiny. Like my existence, which is comprised of just me and my thoughts, is so insignificant when I look at the grand universal scheme of reality. Right? So there's a curiosity within us to understand at a deeper level, what is this world all about? And this is why the Srimad Bhagavatam, right in the second canto, explains the process of universal creation through a conversation between Lord Brahma and Narada Muni. So this is what chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7 deal with, is creation. Okay, I'm going to switch back to my former screen so we can continue discussing these verses. Again, I apologize if the pace is a little fast. It's just I'm conscious of time, and we have quite a few more chapters to go, and I'm trying to go as gently as possible. So here we see that the process of creation is described by Lord Brahma to Narada Muni. And it really begins with a question that Parikshit Maharaj poses to his spiritual master, Shukadeva Goswami. This is how the process of the discussion on creation actually begins. These are the two questions that Parikshit Maharaj poses. He says, I beg to know from you how the personality of Godhead by his personal energies creates these phenomenal universes as they are, which are inconceivable even to the great demigods, right? This is the first question. How is the personality of Godhead creating these universes? It's very difficult to understand. How does he do that? Furthermore, kindly describe how the Supreme Lord, who is all powerful, engages his different energies and different expansions in maintaining and again winding up the phenomenal world in the sporting spirit of a player. So first he wants to know how is he using these energies to manifest the material world. Then he wants to know how is he using his energies to maintain the material world and then wind it up and dissolve it, destroy it, so that he can recreate it again. A very mysterious sort of idea, and he wants to know about that. So then Shukadeva Goswami, to answer these questions, the rest of the chapter is just questions based on this topic. He cites a conversation that took place between Narada Muni and Lord Brahma a long time ago. This is how chapter 5 will begin. And chapter 5 actually begins with a question that Narada Muni poses to his father, Lord Brahma. He says to his father, hold on one second. Oops, sorry, wrong verse. My apologies. Chapter 5. Here we go. My dear father, this is again the conversation between Narada Muni and Lord Brahma in response to Parikshit Maharaj's inquiry about how does the universe come about. He says, my dear father, what is the source of your knowledge? Under whose protection are you standing? And under whom are you working? What is your real position? Do you alone create all entities with material elements by your personal energy? Right. So Narada Muni, this is before like the internet and books had been published. So this seems like a basic question. Like, wait a minute, Narada Muni, are you really asking your father, Lord Brahma, if he is the source of creation? Yes, that's what he's doing. He wants to know. You are the creator, my dear father. Everyone calls you the creator. But are you standing on your own strength, or is there an energy, is there a force even superior to you? Where do you get the ability to actually create this material world, right? And so this will then pave the way for Lord Brahma to actually talk about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Lord Brahma begins his answer by first offering obeisances to Lord Narayan as the source of his intelligence and ability and the source of this entire existence. He then explains a lot of different topics in chapter 5. Again, this is an overview, so I'm not going to look at specific things within this chapter. I'm just giving you a broad overview that for the rest of the chapter, then Lord Brahma talks about the energies of the Supreme Lord, the different incarnations of Vishnu, the manifestations of time, the modes of nature, the subtle and gross identities of living entities, and the entire planetary system. And like I said before I started this particular section, if one has a curiosity about understanding the nature of this world and this universe and how does it all come about, this is a beautiful chapter. It's very satisfying to read from a Vedic perspective. How does reality, how does the universe manifest itself? A very authoritative, a very clear understanding of how the universe manifests. Then in chapter 6, Lord Brahma continues by talking about how the form of the Lord generates everything we see. And the focus of this chapter really is to show that, yes, there's this vast, massive, universal manifestation, but it is never disconnected from the Supreme Lord. It is not that the Lord creates the world and then leaves it, abandons it, but actually he's very intimately connected with this world. And that is sort of the focus of chapter 6. So here's an example of the kind of verses we see in chapter 6. Lord Brahma describes verse after verse things like this. He says, the hairs on his body are the cause of all vegetation, particularly of those trees which are required as ingredients for sacrifice. The hairs on his head and faces are reservoirs for the clouds, and his nails are the breeding ground of electricity, stones, and iron ores. Now, why is this significant? What's significant about this verse is it shows us that nothing exists randomly, right? And this is the main point for spiritualists, is we don't see the world as sort of existing just sort of randomly. Yes, we understand, and we say many times everything comes from Krishna, but how does it come from Krishna? This is the detail of how everything is actually coming from God. It's easy to say, yes, everything begins from God. Everything is his energy, right? We hear that a lot in ISKCON. We pass that around as a phrase. Everything is his energy. But how exactly is his energy? How are the trees his energy, right? How is the grass his energy? How is the rising of the sun his energy? Well, those are his eyes, actually. So in this way, the Srimad Bhagavatam is showing us in a very minute and specific way exactly how it is that God's energy produces this material world, right? And then Lord Brahma, and this is all, and then after he talks about the material creation, sort of the material universe, Lord Brahma will also describe the nature of the spiritual world, how there is such a reality beyond this reality, where there is no death, there is no fear, there is no anxiety. And then he explains a little bit to Narada Muni, his son, how one can approach the spiritual reality. That is what the second half of chapter 6 deals with. So I'll show you one example of a verse from the second half of chapter 6. Lord Brahma says, the spiritual world, which consists of 3/4 of the Lord's energy, is situated beyond this material world and is especially meant for those who will never be reborn. Others who are attached to family life and who do not strictly follow celibacy vows must live within the 3 material worlds. So in this way, you can see he echoes a little bit what we heard at the very beginning of this canto from Shukadeva Goswami himself, right? About those conditioned souls who don't practice sense control, and therefore they're entangled in the material world. In the same way, Lord Brahma is saying those who don't practice strict vows, right, live a sense control life. Celibacy vows, Srila Prabhupada translates as just living with sense control in this material world. Those who live without sense control, and they will continue to be entangled within the 3 material worlds and never make it to the spiritual reality. Now in chapter 7, I want to stop my screen sharing for 1 second and show you my PowerPoint once again. And take a moment to let this all sink in. I know it's a lot to handle, so just take a moment to let it all sink in. We're continuing with the discussion on Parikshit Maharaj's questions of how does the Lord use his personal energies to create, maintain, and destroy the material world. So in chapter 7, what Shukadeva Goswami really wants to talk about through the conversation with Brahma and Narada Muni are the various incarnations. He wants to show that the Lord, having created this universe, having created this world, maintains a very personal relationship with this world. And this is a very, very essential point for practicing devotees, because we don't want to feel abandoned by God, right? To have a deeper sense of how God doesn't abandon us. Not only is he present in every element of creation, but he's actually present whenever we need him. And we see this historically. This actually increases our faith that we can actually depend on Krishna, that Krishna has come in the past, he has come in the present, and in Prabhupada's own words, Prabhupada saw him pulling the Jaladuta across the ocean from India to America. So even in the modern context, Krishna is always looking out and sort of helping his devotees move forward. So in chapter 7, we get an extensive summary of multiple incarnations of the Lord, like Varahadev and Matsya and Rishabdev and Prithu Maharaj and Narana and Rishi and then Kalki and Kapila. For each of these incarnations, there's 1 or 2 or 3 verses like that. But I want to highlight one particular verse from this chapter, which I think is very significant, to just help drive home this point of how the Lord wants to show his personal involvement and care in the lives of his devotees. This is the 16th verse of the 7th chapter. Translation. The personality of Godhead, after hearing the elephant's plea, the elephant here, by the way, is referring to Gajendra, felt that the elephant needed his immediate help. I love this translation, felt that the elephant needed his immediate help. I didn't get a chance to look at the Sanskrit, but I see here that Srila Prabhupada will often add a little bit of a poetic embellishment. We see the Sanskrit actually says Arana Arthinam, which means one who is in need of help, right? It's not directly mentioned in the verse that Krishna was feeling that the elephant needed his help. That's not directly mentioned in the verse, but we can see how Srila Prabhupada, being able to channel sort of the mood of the Lord through his purports and translations, is giving us a little bit of an insight. The pure devotee can do that. That, you know what, it wasn't just that God felt, okay, cool, here's somebody like calling for my help. All right, let me go take care of this. I just another thing to do, it's not that. He actually felt this elephant needs my help. So he got up ready, for he was in great distress. He got up ready to save his devotee. Thus at once the Lord appeared there on the wings of the king of the birds, Garuda, fully equipped with his weapon, the wheel, Chakra. With the wheel, he cut to pieces the mouth of the crocodile to save the elephant, and he delivered the elephant by lifting him by his trunk. So time and time again, we see how the Lord, through his various Leela avatars, his incarnations, is coming to rescue his devotee, to give shelter to his devotees, like that. He ends the chapter, very interestingly, by then, of course, explaining the pastimes of Krishna. He's gone through all the different incarnations like Rishabdev and Matsya and Kapila Dev and Kurma and Vamanadev. But then he comes to the pastimes of Krishna. And although all the other incarnations got only 1 or 2 or 3 verses each, maximum 3, and mostly 1 or 2, to explain the pastimes of Krishna, Lord Brahma speaks 10 verses. And Sri Vishwanath writes an interesting comment in this section. He says, actually, it was the sweetness of Krishna's Leelas that, that so much of the space was devoted to his pastimes. And I thought that was such a nice point, right? When something is sweet, it's hard to put down. Some of us might have given up sweets for Purushottam Mass because we realize that when we see something sweet, we want to eat a lot of it. So it's a great sacrifice. Nobody gives up eating neem leaves for Purushottam Mass, right? Nobody does that. Nobody gives up. That's not really a sacrifice. It's like Krishna, I'm sacrificing hard work for Purushottam Mass. That's not a sacrifice. That's easy. It's easy not to work hard. But Krishna, I'm sacrificing relaxing for Purushottam Mass. That takes work. In the same way, giving up sweets is hard because it's hard to stop eating something, relishing something that's sweet. In the same way, Lord Brahma speaks 10 verses to explain the Braja Leela, the Vrindavan pastimes of Krishna. I thought that was a very sweet. You can really notice it when you read the whole chapter. You see like, whoa, what's going on? Like, how come one personality gets, the bulk of the verses in this chapter? It's because Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes are so sweet. And what makes them so sweet, of course, are just the loving exchanges he has with his devotees, which is really the essence of what this chapter is really about, to show how Krishna is caring for his devotees. So Lord Brahma ends this chapter with a very powerful verse, which I take to be an instruction for all of us that's present on this call. Lord Brahma tells his son Narada Muni, after having described all the incarnations of the Lord and the process of creation and the universal form and all of that, he says, please describe the science of Godhead with determination and in a manner by which it will be possible, quite possible for the human being to develop transcendental devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Hari, the super soul of every living being, and the summum bonum source of all energies. Okay, so he's saying, you've heard now, you've heard me describe these things. Now accept this science with determination and describe it in such a way that you are able to inspire others to take up devotional service. Now, any of us here online, like my friend Ram Raj is here, he's a big preacher in London, right? This is your responsibility, Ram Raj. You have to explain this science of Krishna consciousness in such a way that those who hear from you, right, they develop transcendental devotional service unto the personality of Godhead. This is a tall order. And not just for those who are quote unquote preaching. In one sense, all of us are preaching, right? Even if you're just preaching to the devotees, that is real preaching. So we have to share this knowledge with others, both devotees and non-devotees, in such a way that we're actually able to inspire their inherent propensity to serve God. And Prabhupada says something so beautiful in the purport. I just want to read a few lines of Srila Prabhupada's purport here. Why should we do this? Why should we describe this science to others? Everyone, he says, is hankering after happiness in life. But in this age, the members of human society, blind as they are, do not have the proper vision that the personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all happiness, because he's the ultimate source of everything. Happiness and complete perfection without hindrance can be achieved only by our devotional relationship with him. I'll read that point again. Happiness and complete perfection without hindrance, right? Who wouldn't want unhindered happiness, right? Things make us happy only for a short while, but who wouldn't want unhindered happiness? That sounds pretty good. Can be achieved only by our devotional relationship with him. And it is only by his association that we can get free of distressful material existence. Even those who are after the enjoyment of this material world can also take shelter of the great science of Srimad Bhagavatam, and they will be successful at the end. I love this last line. I don't know about you, but I certainly am full of material desires. I still have them, even though I'm practicing Krishna consciousness. And this last line was so faith-giving that, yes, Hari Sham Das, even if you are after the enjoyment of this material world, you can also take shelter of the great science of Srimad Bhagavatam, and you'll be successful at the end. And in particular, the emphasis on how everyone is looking for happiness, but if we can inspire people to practice devotional service, right, and inspire ourselves to continue practicing devotional service, then we have a chance at unhindered happiness in this world. So hearing all these great topics about the incarnations in the universe and all of that, Parikshit Maharaj is now very, very, you could say, his anticipation, his eagerness to learn more and hear more from his spiritual master is very much heightened. So the entirety of chapter 8, by the way, for those of you who are just joining us, we're doing a second canto overview of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, of the entire second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So chapter 8 is just a series of questions. And Parikshit Maharaj, like any good student, asks a lot of questions on basically everything under the sun. He wants to know everything. He wants to know about the nature of the soul, the nature of material bodies, the placement of the planets, the cycles of time, the systems of dharma and social order, so many topics. And one key point that I took away from chapter 8 is, see, the process of learning is really activated when we have questions, right? If we're wondering, how can I improve my spiritual life? How can I go deeper in my spiritual practice? Or say you're involved in the material world, you own a business, you own a restaurant or a hotel, or you're working at a company like Yashodanandan I believe he's like a high level financial executive. He studied architecture. I think he's like high level financial executive. And if he's wondering like, how can I don't know, improve the financial efficiency of my business, or how we do accounting or anything, right? Progress comes from asking questions. That's the point I'm trying to make. If you want to learn more, grow more, succeed, whether it's material or spiritual, we have to have questions. If we don't have questions, we can't expect to grow. We'll stay where we're at. Even in spiritual life, we want to improve our chanting. Well, then there should be a question asked: how do I improve my chanting? As long as we're just aware that our chanting sucks, that's not going to make it better. But when we ask the question, well, how do I improve it? That's what's going to make it better, right? It's the same in the material world. If you want to learn a subject, if you want to master something, you have to ask, how can I become an amazing chef? How can I become an awesome manager? How can I become a better doctor, lawyer, whatever we want to be? So I thought chapter 8 is very significant in that it's highlighting that a good student has questions. And actually seeing the questions of Parikshit Maharaj, Shukadev Goswami is super enlivened. And that's how chapter 8 ends, with Shukadev Goswami becoming very excited and happy to now dive deeper into these topics. We're almost at the end here. I didn't think we would make it, but we are almost have. Chapter 9, the second to last chapter of the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, focuses primarily on a vision that Lord Brahma has. It describes how Lord Brahma once was able to make it. He sat in meditation in, after he had emanated from the navel of Lord Vishnu. He sat in a deep state of meditation, and he was actually able to have darshan of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. And he posed some questions to the Supreme Personality about how the Lord creates and manifests the world, and how, very important, Lord Brahma wants to know, you have entrusted me with the responsibility of creation. I don't want to become proud while I do this kind of work. See, it's the nature of the mode of passion that when you engage in passion activity, there might sometimes be the tendency to become a little angry or a little proud, right? Because creation requires passion. And one of the, you could say, negative side effects of passion is this feeling of entitlement or pride or anger that comes from engaging with the mode of passion. The benefit of passion is that it creates. The danger of passion is that it can lead to a little bit of pride and anger. In the same way, the benefit of the mode of goodness is that it leads to kind of equanimity and wisdom. But the flip side of that is one becomes conditioned to that feeling of happiness and well-being in the material world, and therefore one does not seek spiritual enlightenment because one is satisfied with his situation in the material world. One does not seek to improve it or rise above it, right? This is sort of the flip side, the negative side of the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness also, there is the danger of becoming proud, because the more knowledge you have, the more clarity you have about the world. And generally, sometimes materialistic people who are very knowledgeable tend to be very proud. That's sort of the flip side. So every mode of nature has its benefit and its disadvantage, right? So the benefit of the mode of ignorance is that it allows you to engage as a worker, as a laborer, you're able to serve other people, you're able to assist in higher functions, right, as in the position of a Shudra. But the flip side is that the mode of ignorance can make you self-destructive and emotional, and unable to see what's in your best interest. So like that, every mode of nature has its benefit and its disadvantage. So Lord Brahma asks the Supreme Lord, like, how can I not become proud through the process of creation? And to answer Lord Brahma's questions on how he, the Supreme Lord, manifests the material world, and how Lord Brahma can protect himself from becoming proud, the Lord speaks the Chatur Shloki, the 4 seed verses of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. And these 4 seed verses, verses 33 and 34, discuss the process of relationship or sambandha. So these are the 3 core principles of our bhakti philosophy. There's 3 things in bhakti: relationship, practice, and goal, right? Just like when you start a job someplace, the first thing is a job description, right? Okay, what am I supposed to, or like the title, like, okay, I'm the accountant, or I'm the office manager, or I'm the customer service representative. Then what follows next is your job description. Okay, what do you do in that function? And finally, what is the result? I get a paycheck, or I get a promotion, something like that, right? So in the same way in spiritual life, you have to have 3 things. First of all, the nature of reality, relationship, right? Who am I? What is God? What is our relationship? Okay, then what do I have to do to experience that relationship? And what is the result of doing that practice? That is the goal. So in these 4 seed verses of the Bhagavatam, Verses 33 and 34 will discuss the reality of God and the relationship of God with the world. Verses 35 will talk about practice. What do we have to do? And verse 36 will then lead us to the goal of spiritual practice. So please stay with me. By the way, each of these verses has extensive commentary by the acharyas. We, of course, don't have the time for all of that. This is just an overview. So I'm just going to give you a 1 or 2 line summary of each verse and move on. So this is text 33. This is the Lord speaking to Lord Brahma. He says, Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation when there was nothing but myself. Right? So before anything came into being, I was there. Nor was there the material nature, the cause of this creation. That which you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead. And after annihilation, what remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. So Lord Brahma, I'm always there. I exist through all time. I am not modified or changed by the activities of creation and destruction. I am eternally present, eternally the same, and I'm fully in control. This is very important because before you begin the process of any spiritual path, bhakti or anything at all, you have to know who it is that you're worshiping. Who is that personality that you're trying to have a relationship with? So to understand, you could say the stable nature of God is the foundational first step in spiritual practice. And you know what? That personality whom we're trying to worship, he's never affected by the changes of this world. And he was there before, he's there in the present, and he will be there in the future. He's always approachable and he's not changed or modified. Like we human beings are, right? Today, somebody could be your best friend. You're trying to have a relationship with someone. Today, they love you. Next month, they could hate you. This is a common experience, right? People get married thinking we'll, till death do us apart, but 70% of the times death does not do us apart. Divorce does us apart. So every relationship in this world is fallible and changes and modifies over time, but God doesn't. This is the point of the first verse. Text 34, again, continuing with this idea of relationship or the nature of God. The Lord speaks, O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation to me, has no reality. Know it as my illusory energy, that reflection which appears to be in darkness. So the key point in this verse, according to Acharyas, is this idea, if it is without relationship to me, has no reality. So what the Lord is saying here is that which you think can exist without a relationship to me, that is illusion, right? So when establishing a relationship with God, we have to learn to see him in everything. And if you see something disconnected from him, then that is Maya. That is the illusion part. If you cannot see how God is involved in this situation with this particular reality, if you cannot see the involvement of God in this particular situation or that reality, then that is the beginning of illusion, right? And illusion, specifically, the word used by Acharyas is avidya, which means ignorance. So when there's ignorance, one is not able to see the connection of things with their source, okay? Now, an important point here to understand is that avidya has two faces. Avidya means to not know something. It also means to mistake something for that which it isn't. What do I mean by that? So if you can take a look at my screen real quick, if you see me, you'll see me. I'm holding up a white mouse, right? It's a Apple Magic mouse. Okay. One level of ignorance is you have no idea what this is, and actually, it is hard to tell. It looks kind of cool. It could be a spaceship. It could be anything. It could be a remote control. Who knows what it is? So one level of ignorance is you don't know what it is. The second level of ignorance is you mistake it for something that which it isn't. So if you're a child, you might think, oh, cool, it's sharp. I can use it to like cut things. And maybe it's like a car that you slide down the stairs, maybe it's like a bar of soap, it looks like soap. So the second level of ignorance is when you mistake it for something that which it isn't. So in the same way, when we look at the material world, because of ignorance, first we see this world is disconnected from God. And then we mistakenly assume that this world is meant for my happiness, which it isn't. So this is how avidya disconnects us from the absolute reality. And the Lord is saying that is illusion. That is the very basis of illusion. So now what he's also saying is because I am intimately connected with everything in existence, you can experience me through a spiritual practice. And that is what the point of the 35th verse is. Krishna has said that you should see everything in connection to me. So then the natural question that comes up is, well, how do I do that? You've asked me to see everything in creation in relationship with you, but how am I supposed to do that? And that is the point of the 35th verse. The Lord says, O Brahma, please know that the universal elements enter into the cosmos and at the same time do not enter into the cosmos. Similarly, I myself also exist within everything created, and at the same time, I'm outside of everything, right? So the acharyas have explained the key point here is I myself also exist within everything created. The key point here is the acharyas are saying, here the Lord is talking about his pastimes, that he has a personal connection with the world, as we have seen earlier in this canto, through the description of the incarnations. The Lord is personally getting involved in this world and to have what? To have pastimes with his devotees. And the whole point, the whole purpose of spiritual practice is to engage in our relationship with Krishna. Isn't it? Like Kishore here in Chicago, they're on the altar. They're there. God is there on the altar. He has appeared to experience a relationship with you. You can go to the temple, well, maybe not right now, but on Saturdays from 4 to 6, and you can pray to him and experience a relationship with him. You can have a picture of him in your house and cook and offer him some nice prasad. So God has appeared in this material world to facilitate through the practices of spiritual life, the feeling, the sense of a relationship with him. This is what the acharyas have explained is to be the essence of the 35th verse, right? God performs these pastimes because he wants to experience loving relationships with his devotees. And we perform our spiritual practice to really nurture and cultivate that relationship. Because think about it, right? If I told you you could do all the sadhana you want, chant all you want, read all you want, you will never experience God in this material world. That'll be a little disappointing, isn't it? So if God had not entered this world, then what will be the fruit of our spiritual practice? We want to experience a relationship with Krishna, but if Krishna is just not there in this world, and no matter how much spiritual practice we do, we'll never experience him, then we'll be a little discouraged, isn't it? So that's why this verse is very important to understand, and the acharyas have explained this verse is really highlighting the process of practice in spiritual life, because by practice, you can experience God who has entered into this cosmos, into everything that is created. The last and final verse of the Chatur Shloki is built upon this natural question that comes up based on this verse that, okay, you're saying God exists in the world and I can practice to experience a relationship with him. Well, how long should I keep going for? Like, okay, I'm supposed to experience my relationship with him, but does that come to an end, right? What is the conclusion of all this? And therefore the 36th verse says, a person who is searching after the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, must certainly search for it up to this. And this is the key word in this entire verse is this. In all circumstances, in all space and time, and both directly and indirectly. So a lot of commentary on this verse by the acharyas. What does it mean to search after the supreme personality of God in all circumstances, in all space and time, directly and indirectly? And what does it mean to search for him up to this? Well, this refers to prema bhakti, or pure love of Godhead. The idea is the living entity should practice spiritual life all the way to the stage of prema until one has attained complete, unalloyed love for God. This is literally why the world exists. There's so much philosophy that's been discussed in this canto about the nature of creation, the planets, the universe, the different layers of the living entity, the subtle and gross bodies, the demigods. So much has been discussed, right? Such intricacy is present in this world for only one thing, so that you and I can practice spiritual life and experience the love of God. That's why the world exists. And that's a very profound point, right? That's why I think when the pure devotees, they come to this world, they see what we're doing, how we're wasting our life, and they think, my God, like you're wasting a human form of life. I thought of an analogy to make my point. Imagine that you're the son of a very wealthy person, right? And your father has given you a big business. And he says, my dear daughter, my dear son, take this business. I've set it up. You have a factory, you have workers, you have a board, you have a product, you have a place, you have money in the bank. Now use all of this to become the wealthiest person in this world, right? And then 2 years later, your father comes back and he comes into the office and he sees that, you're just sitting there playing video games and the machines aren't working and everything is falling apart, right? That's now this, follow the analogy here for a second. The whole world exists so we can facilitate our journey back to Godhead. Instead, what do? As Shukadeva Goswami says at the beginning of the canto, we get absorbed in things that have nothing to do with our ultimate benefit. We get absorbed in, living a life of sensual gratification, just working hard, making money, and going to sleep. That's what materialistic people are engaged in. So this is how the pure devotee feels. He comes back, he sees, wow, God has created such an intricate system just for you, my dear living entity, to get out of this cycle of entanglement. And look at what you've done. You've completely wasted this wonderful opportunity for becoming free from the cycle of birth and death. And therefore, the Chatur Shloki of the Bhagavatam, these 4 verses, will completely lay out the philosophy of bhakti, the practices of bhakti, the result of bhakti, just to inspire us to take full advantage of the human form of life. Now we come to the last chapter I know we have 5 minutes left, and this last chapter summary will take just about 5 minutes. It's the 10 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's 10 topics that the Bhagavatam discusses. What I've done is I'm just going to give you a one-line summary of each topic. That way we can kind of get a sense of what those 10 topics are. Is it okay if we go 5 minutes over time? Because I would like to see people have any reflections or questions. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Sure, that's fine.
Great. So the last and final chapter, I'm gonna stop my screen now because I'm not going to share any more verses because we've had plenty of verses for the night. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. The last and final chapter of the second canto deals with the 10 subjects of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which begins with Sarga, or elemental creation. What this discusses is how from subtle, basically the universe begins from Pradhan, which is undifferentiated energy. And from that energy emerge subtle substances like the false ego, intelligence. And when those subtle substances are combined with other elements in creation like earth, water, fire, it leads to the development of sense organs. So this is the first topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the creation of the universe from subtle to gross. I'm going to put it very simply so that it registers. This is from subtle to gross, the creation of the universe. That's the first topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The second is Brahma's creation. How does Lord Brahma take these elemental, you could say, pieces, building blocks of the universe to then create the variety of planets, the variety of psychologies and forms of living entities, the universal, you could say, like the kings and the artists and the demons and the demigods and the Prajapati. So how does Lord Brahma manifest variety? And why does he do that? Because every living entity in this material world needs to have a sense of identity, right? That's how the false ego works. We need to have a sense of uniqueness about ourselves, right? So therefore, Lord Brahma creates things like you're Indian, you're American, you're an artist, you're a warrior. And this gives us some motivation to live in the world, because it gives us a sense of identity. So this Visarga is the second subject matter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is also explained in the book. The third topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam is sthanam or maintenance. So how is this whole intricate system of universe and living entities and all of this being maintained by the Lord? The fourth is poshanam or protection, how the Lord provides individual protection for each living entity as super soul, right? Even those who don't believe in God, super soul is in their heart to facilitate their karma, to maintain their bodies and minds. And furthermore, how he provides protection to his devotees. As you can see in this lotus petal, there's a picture of Gajendra reaching out with a lotus flower to Lord Vishnu. So in this way, the Lord is giving protection to his devotees. This is also discussed in the Srimad Bhagavatam through multiple stories. Utvaha, which means creative impetus, that refers to a system of karma, how by the modes of nature and the force of time, the living entity is engaged in a cycle of action and reaction. This is elaborately explained also in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The change of manus. Now we have this world and people are living in this world and acting in this world. We need rules. We need principles to regulate our life. Otherwise, it is easy to become degraded in the material world. And these principles are given by the great kings. So actually, in one sense, the Srimad Bhagavatam is basically the history of the descendants of Manu, right? It begins with the first Manu and then the kings that come in his line, one after the other, and the great things that they accomplished and how they preserved dharma and how they protected the living entities and propagated religious principles. So like that, this genealogical chain of the descendants of Manu is another key theme of the Bhagavatam. Ishanu Katha, stories of the Lord's love and care for his devotees, like Nrsimhadev, like Vamanadev, of course, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Like that, the Bhagavatam is filled with stories of how the Lord shows his love and care for his devotees. Nirodha or dissolution, at the end of one cycle of the universe, all living entities go back into the body of Vishnu, awaiting the next cycle of creation. This is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And when I was thinking about this point, I was thinking, imagine all of us, we've all been together in the body of Vishnu multiple times. But just see how powerful material desires are. Having gone through the cycle of creation dissolution so many times, we still don't get it. We're still here. We're still hoping to get a piece of the material pie and experience something we are yet to experience, although we've experienced everything already. We're thinking something magical is waiting for us at the end of the rainbow, but nothing magical is waiting. Everything's already been tasted and done, but we're still hoping for something new in this life. So this process of Nirodha, how dissolution takes place and living entities enter the body of Vishnu, then come back out. This is also discussed in the Bhagavatam. Finally, liberation, how by yoga or union with the divine, we end the cycle of constant reincarnation, the principles of becoming free from material entanglement. And all of this to bring us to the ultimate topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is Ashraya, or the supreme shelter. That, understanding the nature of reality, the nature of the soul, and the process of spiritual life, realizing that there is one personality, one shelter that is forever dependable, completely unshakable, and ever willing to reciprocate with us. This personality, who's, I'll repeat it again, he's unshakable, he's forever dependable, and ever willing to reciprocate with us. That is Krishna. He's the supreme shelter. So this is the final topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is discussed in chapter 10. So with that, we come to an end of our overview. Wow, right at 6:30. I know that was a lot to handle. There's a lot of content. I'm sorry, please forgive me for shortcomings in my presentation. I'm not a very good speaker. But I tried my best. I'm wondering if anybody has any reflections or would like to share, add something. By the way, is this Alex? Alex, is that you from Jamaica? I can't see the picture, but I wonder if this is Alex from Jamaica. I haven't. Wow.
It looks like it is, but I'm not seeing her connected to the audio part of this Zoom call.
Oh, wow, Alex. I hope you're well. I always wondered like how you've been and where you're at. And nice to see you on the Zoom call. Maybe you can send a little message in the chat group. But welcome. Does anybody have any reflections or anything they want to add? Maybe I forgot something in this overview, something that I overlooked.
I'm not seeing anything in the YouTube chat, though I invite the participants in the Zoom call if you would like to present a reflection or any questions in a couple of minutes that we have.
It's kind of a lot to handle, so I wouldn't be surprised if everyone's just like, whoa, just letting it all sink in. Uj, do you have anything? You're a scholar of the Bhagavatam. I'm sure there's some nectar stored up.
Not particularly. I was just appreciating the flow that you created, and yeah, nice presentation.
Okay, I think I don't think it doesn't look like anybody have any comments or questions. If you want to carry on with the next
Okay.
part.
Unless you wanted to have any closing thoughts, we can officially conclude the Sunday feast.
Sundar has a comment. He says, I love this point you made at the start. Every time we get tested and choose Krishna over Maya, we get closer to God. Yashodanandan, you still there?
Yes, Prabhu. Oh, I wasn't sure if you wanted to comment on the comment.
No, I was just sharing the comment. That's it. I don't have anything to say. I think I've said everything I needed to say.
Okay. And it looks like Alex wrote back as well. Well done. Excellent presentation of the second canto, and Haribol Prabhu. All right. Well, thank you very much, Harisham Prabhu. Really grateful to you for taking on this service, and looking forward to more overviews in the future as we go through the chapters. And thank you to everyone for joining us as well. Hare Krishna, and see you all next week.